Hey gardeners, welcome back to the live stream. In today's episode, this is episode number 4. We have another guest with us, David from the Bowtie Life Gardens. He is an amazing gardener here on YouTube as well, and he's also a fellow Florida gardener as well. And so we'll be discussing about tips and tools in gardening. So that's a thing that we don't hear about so commonly when it comes down to gardening is gardeners discussing about the tools that are the most useful in the garden. Of course, we'll be giving some tips here and there when it comes down to gardening itself. This will be more kind of towards the Florida audience as we both have more knowledge because we are located in Florida. And like we were discussing with Gardener Scott last time, if you haven't seen that live stream, make sure to go watch it. What we were discussing last time was Florida is its own little climate. It has its own little mindset and it kind of does what it wants to. So we kind of have to garden differently from other states. So, without further ado, here is David. I'll let David have the floor for a little bit and talk to you guys about who he is, what he does, what his channel's based on. So, yeah.
Well, hey, Emmanuel, thank you for having me on. I'm Bowtie David, in case you haven't met me. I started my channel a few years ago after about 2 years of debating. I'm fully ADHD, and so I have a tendency to have to really think about things a long time before I can actually do something. But I wanted to so I had a lot of time to think about what I wanted to do. I wanted to show a real garden, not a pretty garden. And don't get me wrong, I love pretty gardens, but I like real gardens because that's about the best my brain can accomplish. And I watch Laura over at Garden Answer and her beautiful gardens, and I drool, but there's no way I could keep the focus that they have and do what they do. So I wanted to show a real garden, and I've got a lot of weeds, but I also have a lot of produce. Last year we were 3 pounds short of harvesting 500 pounds of produce.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it, frankly.
Yeah. So, something that I came to realize. So, I actually saw, David, you had released a video not that long ago on turmeric. And something that I love growing, I grow turmeric every year more because I sometimes there's spots I forget that I have planted there, so they come back year after year. And so for I only grow two colors, which is the orange and the blue turmeric. Those are the only colors I grow. I know there's a
Blue.
wide, yeah, there's a wide spec. Let me pull up a photo, as a matter of fact, because
Yeah, that sounds cool. I haven't seen the blue.
hey, like how I mentioned before, I am considering starting a shop soon, but I have actually another project that I'm working on right now that will be soon released. But I have been working on something when it comes down to gardening, and one of those things have been seeing if I could provide some of these plants online because they're not so common. Hence the blue turmeric. Um, so let me
Well,
see
you
if
know
I can.
that potato that you showed not too long ago. I would buy some of that. That was interesting. What was it
The
called? What was it?
potato mint.
Yeah, potato man. Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Yeah, not a lot of people know about that one, and I didn't even know about it either. So until I
And the
come until like when I started permaculture is when I came to realize what it was, and it's a very useful plant. So this is actually the different colors of turmeric that they are.
Oh wow, I did
So
not know there were that many colors.
yeah, and so I only grow the orange and the blue. The only thing is that there's a huge difference of growth habits in each. Of course, the colors, what I realized is that when it comes down to the regular orange, it will produce way better and way more than the other colors because the although with the comes to the colors, the tubers of the orange one are smaller, but they come in greater quantity. But the ones of the colors, the roots or tubers are more thicker and they come in a
Oh,
smaller quantity. So it's a really fun plant to grow. So if
huh.
you're interested, we can set something up, and I can send some because I have too much, too much.
Hey,
I have
if you're growing any turmeric, you've got too much.
yeah, I have too much right now for me to handle. So like, if you
So
need some, I got you on that one. So
well, I grew it in one little bed, raised bed last year and year before, and then I got to the end of the winter this past winter, and I was like, I had this big old platter, huge platter of turmeric left over. Like, what am I going to do with this? So I just started walking around the beds, sticking it in every. I've got it growing in every corner of the property, prolific. And the cool thing was, like, there was a few places I had thick grass growing, and I just made a hole with my finger and shoved it down in below the grass. Came up just fine, and that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for. Tough stuff. It's going to come up no matter what happens. And turmeric, I'm sold. And
Hmm.
I've got another one right now. I just started a bunch of canna lilies, but yeah, tons of stuff like that. I'm loving the turmeric.
Yeah, turmeric. I think when it comes out to the blue turmeric, there's a huge difference because it actually has like a purple variegation to it. Like it has a line of purple going down the middle, like the spine of the leaf. And it's really really cool.
Really? Oh, that's cool.
Is just pure green leaves, but when it comes down to the blue one, it has like a blue, like a purple line going down the center, which is really really cool. And so yeah, definitely, if you want to set something up, I'll send you some your way because,
Okay.
like I mentioned, it's too much to handle. Um, Same goes with the potato mint. That is a plant that won't ever go away as
Yeah.
much as you want it because the tubers stay behind, the roots stay behind, and you have constant growth. Same goes with turmeric. With me, I only plant them in containers to resell locally. But then the ones I do use, I plant them in the ground and they come up amazing. If not, there's a
Hmm.
turmeric that actually made it to these random corner of my garden. That's where I have my shade house and a huge mamey tree. There's like a random spot there. I guess what I did was throw the roots in there. I didn't even plant them, and they came up so big, like better than the other turmeric plants. So
My, that's awesome.
that's what I'm saying. It's like it's an ongoing thing with these things. So
And the flowers on the turmeric is just unbelievable. That heavy stalk with just the column of flowers. Oh my goodness, that's just
I
beautiful.
haven't experienced flowers on my turmeric.
Ooh. Oh yeah, I
Yeah,
did it first time last year, and there were these tall, about foot long columns of just thick flowers, and the stalk is really stiff. It's very sturdy. It's like and it sat in a pot in a vase on Mrs. Bowtie's desk for like, I don't know, 3 weeks before it started to wilt away. Yeah, long lifetime.
that's very cool. So we're gonna go ahead and jump straight into the tools. So I would go ahead and start off with what's a tool you'll see yourself constantly using in your garden? Like it's a tool that you can't say, hey, I never use this one. If not, it's a tool that you say, I have to have this in my garden.
Well, the first one that I'm going to mention has nothing to do with you, Emmanuel. You being young and good knees and everything else, being able to get up and down. I love my kneeling bench. It has everything there in one place, and it has nice handles that I can grip on to stand up again because I have a lot of knee and hip problems, and I know a lot of older gardeners see my thing, and I tell them that if you have any knee and hip problems, you need to get this because it's going to make you more apt to get down there and get those weeds. But I mean, your basic stuff. And the thing to know about me is I'm a real cheapskate. I don't buy a lot of stuff. So when I do have something, it's something I will use a lot. And like the hori hori, you've shown your hori hori several times. I mean, that is a tool you can't live without, is it?
Yeah, it's a very cool tool. It's a very, very good tool.
Yeah,
And
and
so it's when it comes down to tools, I feel like it's a bit like interesting because yeah, sure, you have your shovels, you have your rakes and whatnot, but those are those certain tools that really make a difference. Like when Danny was on the other day, I believe he was the second
he was your
episode.
first guest. Yeah,
Yeah,
second episode. Yeah,
first guest. He showed me a tool he had created that's better for seed like transplants, and that one was a really cool tool. And
yeah.
so when it comes down to these inventions like that, it's those tiny tools that make a huge difference in one's gardening experience. Because yeah, sure, you have your shovels and your rakes and whatnot, but those small tools that you think you never needed, but come to realize that you did, always make a huge difference. And so that's definitely something that I see myself wanting to use more is when it comes down to seed starting or transplanting because like how I mentioned before in my seed starting videos that it's very you have to be very cautious when it comes down to dealing with seedlings because you can't disturb those roots so much because you just have to place them from one area from their seed starting tray to the ground and not disturb any roots. Because if you break a root on accident, the seedling is almost not viable anymore because of the fact that it's so young that it hasn't properly developed any
Right.
resources or energy to say, okay, I'm gonna rebound from this. So that's why I feel like tools like that make a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like your seed starting trays. You got those from over at Epic Gardening, right? You're working with
Yes,
them. Yeah. Um,
yes.
I need to get some good seed starting trays, but I'm so cheap. I'm still using the original Jiffy trays. My sons bought me 2 Jiffy trays 6 years ago, and I have used the fire out of those things. But I know I've got my eye on those. I love that big hole on the bottom and the way they're designed, the slots down the side. I got to get something like that to
They're
start my
very,
root.
very good. They're very much reusable. They're not they are plastic, but they're hard plastic,
Mhm.
meaning the plastic that you can reuse over and over again and it won't
Yeah.
break. You could stand on them literally and they won't break. They're so viable and they're so good. And I have found that when, like, I spoke to many gardeners before, I'm not a huge seed starter at all. I suck at growing seeds. But this has been a huge game changer. If not this time around, I already have my corn and broom corn growing. I planted my lentils yesterday, and they have been doing really, really well because the transplanting process have been very easier. The seed trays were able to drain properly because here where I'm located, we've been getting thunderstorms like crazy
Mhm.
every day now. And so I have to make sure that the seedlings are in an area that has well drainage, because that's another thing, they cannot sit in water because then they will go ahead and rot. So they're super viable to becoming rotted plants because if they sit in water. But due to that big hole in the bottom in those slits, it has the best drainage out there.
Yeah.
So
It doesn't
I
get better.
definitely recommend for any beginner gardener, any gardener looking into getting some good seed starting trays, to go check it out. Jay actually went ahead and put a link towards it. They are amazing. And of course, Epic Gardening has a wide range of different products as well. They actually came out with like the one that Danny has, the
Yeah.
transplanting plug. If not, they came out with that one as well not that long ago. They just announced it to us, the affiliates, that they have just released a new product on making those holes that the
Nice.
exact same size of the seed starting plug. So that
Oh
is
yeah, I saw that. Yeah. That's cool.
very useful. And so I'm like, okay,
Well, you're
those
talking about the strength of those plug trays. I still remember the episode where Jacques and Kevin pulled a vehicle up on top of some of those things, and they just stood there, no problem. Wow, that's pretty cool.
they're very durable, very durable. And I was really thankful to have a couple. I have a couple trays of those that was sent out to me, and they have been amazing. There is just phenomenal how they've been doing. So that's another actual gardening tool. When it comes down to seed starting, get the
Right.
proper tools, get the proper materials, because if you don't, you won't have success. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about that a little bit. What are some tools or materials you'd recommend gardeners to use when it comes down to seed starting?
Okay, well, I've been teasing you with that chart for a while. Don't pull it up just yet, but there is one tool that I use, and it's something that, I hear Gardner Scott talking about, and it's the intensity of the sun, and we hear Gardner Scott talk about the intensity of his sun, and we hear other people throughout the country talk about that, and I have shade cloth. I have some pretty heavy duty shade cloth, and I got the 50% shade cloth. And I always heard Scott say, our sun is pretty intense. And I wanted to find out how intense Scott's sun is to my sun. And so this chart that Emmanuel's going to pull up here in a moment is the result of the solar intensity. And I want you to notice here, as soon as we get this pulled up, there it is. Notice here, this is for 4 locations: Miami, Destin, Denver, which is below Gardner Scott by, I think, 1,000 feet or something like that, and then St. Cloud, Minnesota. And this is solar intensity. And you can see, like, St. Cloud, Minnesota, it's that purple line along the bottom. Their intensity is a lot less than the intensity of all the other places. But now look at Destin and Miami. Destin and Miami are those 2 middle lines. And believe it or not, Miami has less solar intensity than Destin. You have any clue as to why that would be, Emmanuel?
No idea.
Right? I
Yeah.
saw that. I was like, no, that can't be. And I double checked this. You have more humidity than we do. The humidity cuts the solar intensity. Also, you have a little bit more atmosphere for the sun to get through ever so slightly than we do here in Destin, Florida. But now look at that top line, which is Denver. And you look up there and see Denver gets so much more solar intensity by 10 to 20% more solar intensity than Miami and Destin do in Florida. And the reason is because number one, they're not humid. There's a lot less humidity to break up the sunlight as it comes in. And number two, the atmosphere up higher, 6,000 feet above you and me, Emmanuel, is
Hmm.
a lot thinner. And so he gets this sun that's unbelievable. And I would never have imagined that it was that much different uh, as far as solar intensity. So solar uh, solar shade cloth. Sorry, shade cloth. You can go ahead and take it down. Shade cloth is uh, how much shade cloth you're going to use, and I have 50% shade cloth, and I think Gardner Scott says he uses 30% shade cloth, and I've been having some challenges with my shade cloth with the tomatoes and stuff. And after seeing that and watching, how Gardner Scott's tomatoes look, they're always picture perfect, just beautiful. And I'm thinking I need to get less coverage on my shade cloth. And so shade cloth is a huge thing that's on my brain right now, and I might have to reinvest in better shade cloth and listen to Gardner Scott this time.
Yeah, when it comes down to shade cloth, I haven't used some personally. I've never actually saw myself to actually grab some. I don't know if it's because since my style of gardening is more like growing plants that could
Yeah.
sustain the level of heat that is not required. But I also see myself when it comes down to basic vegetables, I usually focus my time on those during the fall and winter when shade cloth is not really necessary because
Hmm.
our heat is not that bad.
Right.
However, since now I am trying to start some seeds midsummer, I don't know how that will turn out, but I do have some experience with shade cloth because with the nursery I used to work at about a few months ago,
Yeah.
they did have to have shade cloth over the top because it was really, really hot. And so those plants, although they are tropical plants that sustain our heat, they still required a level of shade cloth because they were in containers and more viable to our sun.
Right.
So I know that plays a huge part when it comes down to gardening and how well your plants will perform, especially your basic vegetables at the end of the day, because our sun could be very crucial.
Oh
And
yeah.
I was really surprised to see how those different charts and those different levels, but like how you mentioned, here's very much lots of humidity, especially where I'm located in. Too much humidity almost. It's terrible. The only like how I explained to Gardner Scott is I can only garden usually in the mornings or in the afternoons because if
Yeah.
not, I will die. I will literally suffocate outside with the humidity, those mosquitoes, the heat. It's
Oh
just not a favorable climate to garden outside for. So definitely shade glass plays a huge part into one of those materials you have to use. Now I feel like you use shade cloths depending on where you are because yes, I'll sure we here in Florida use shade cloth and probably Gardner Scott uses shade cloth. I feel like some states might not use shade cloth because they don't deal with heat. If not, they might use the frost cloth, like the
mhm.
frost protector, because they deal with lots of cold. So you don't
Yeah.
see us using frost covers because there's no point of it.
Never.
But you see us using the heat protectors. So
Yeah, we just barely could use frost cover some winters, and I think I might invest in. I'm just going to go down to the local Goodwill or whatever and buy a whole bunch of sheets that I can cover with. I did
mhm.
the one thing I did. Um, I lost almost all my. I lost my Satsuma orange and my pink grapefruit trees to the freeze on Christmas of 22, and
Mm,
we had several days. It was below freezing for 3 days, 4 days, something like that, and they did not survive. My lemon trees are coming back slowly. I have one lemon now after what is this 25? This is two and a
same.
half years. Finally, I'm getting one lemon out of my lemon tree. But yeah,
So Jay asked the question for you. What were the numbers on the chart for solar intensity? I'm looking up from my own now.
Well, for Destin, it kind of averaged between 100 and 120, um, and that's the par value. And for Gardner Scott, it got almost up to 100 or just got just over 150. Uh, and that again, that blew me away. I couldn't believe the solar intensity because he's has less atmosphere and less humidity. Makes a huge difference. Yeah, I was very shocked. That
Gardner Scott.
was that.
Poor Gardner Scott. I feel so bad for him.
I know, right? It kind of brings a whole new reality to my brain.
So something else when it comes down to diving into tools for gardening, excuse me, is the things we use to treat our plants. That is a tool that I consider because here in Florida, at least, we deal with mealybugs, we deal with scale, we deal with aphids, we deal with a couple number of different pests and diseases that tend to come through and braid our gardens, especially if we do basic gardening. It's kind of more like when you're going to have it other than if you're going to have it. So,
Right.
what are some solutions you see yourself using to treat these types of issues or pests or diseases?
Well, I think the first practice is observation. And like one really good example is um, whitefly. And my first year of gardening, I had a whitefly problem that was just off the charts. However, it wasn't on any of my useful plants. It was on a poinsettia that my wife had put out. Um, she had used it for Christmas, and then we just set it out outside the front door and never really did anything with it. I would water it occasionally. And when it came whitefly season, I noticed that the whiteflies made this cloud around my poinsettia. And you'd tap the plant, and this little
Oof.
puff of whitefly would come out, and then they'd go back in. But I started looking around the garden. I had no whitefly anywhere else. And so, you start getting into things about companion planting. That was my start on companion planting. And I went through that and looked around on all my plants. None of my plants had whitefly on them, just that poinsettia. And so now every year, Mrs. Bowtie likes to get lots of poinsettias around the house. And when she's done with them, I put them out in different parts of the property, and they have the whitefly. And I don't have a whitefly problem anymore. And I don't like the use of chemicals. I just really don't. I'm even hesitant for organic stuff, which I have a container of what's the diatomaceous earth. I have a bag of that I've had for 6 years, and I could probably count on my fingers how many times I've used it in 6 years, and it's been extreme things. Uh, I use the slug repellent for what, just a couple months in the spring, and then it's just a very short time. But also those mosquitoes. Right now, I've propagated out a whole bunch of citronella, and I want to have 50 citronella plants all over the property before the end of the year this year. I did the rosemary. Rosemary helps with mosquitoes and cabbage moth and a bunch of other things. And so I took 54 cuttings of my rosemary bushes. I have 45 of them survived, and they're slowly getting all around the property. And so I'm trying to use more and more natural things. And I mean, how great is it would it be to smell citronella or rosemary or mint? I use mint. Mint is a really good one. I preach about mint. Now I had a video said you have to grow it responsibly. You put it in the ground, your neighbor 12 miles away will have it in 5 years. It's terrible stuff. You keep it in a pot, slows down the rats. And you were talking recently. Oh, your banana short. You were talking about how you have a rodent problem. I have a rodent problem too. We have a raccoon living up underneath our solar panel right now. But yeah, but mint slows those critters down. The squirrels, the rats, and a few other things. It doesn't eliminate them, which I'm trying to work with nature, but it does slow them down and it reduces them immensely.
That's a really good tip. With me, I do use neem oil and stuff like that, because with my fruit trees, the unfortunate thing about fruit trees is that they are more prone when it comes down to these disease and pests. For example, I have the Barbados cherry, for example, one of my best
Mm,
fruiting trees in my garden. However, that does get white flies sometimes, and that does get a crap ton of mealybugs
mm-hmm.
when it's the most humid in the season. So, of course, I try to just cut back the branches and call it a day, but it's just something that just doesn't go away. And something I've realized is just by using a bit of neem oil on the most driest days, if we ever have a dry day, um, it will help like calm it down. But the good thing about permaculture I've came to realize is that I kind of, when it comes down to these pests and diseases, if it's got to a point where the plant can't handle it on its own, then I kind of step in and help it. But if it's a plant, if it's like a thing that the plant can kind of like rebound from,
Yeah.
then I just kind of let the plant does that. For example, with my ice cream bean tree,
Oh,
that when I recently had planted it almost 4 years ago, it was dealing with mealy bugs like crazy, but I never really treated it because the plant was just growing and growing and growing and growing to the point where it just bound back from the mealybug damage, and now it no longer has any mealybugs anymore. If
yeah.
not, the plant looks luscious. So I came to realize that if it came to a point where the plant is like suffering and clearly like telling you help me, then I usually
Yeah.
just back off and let the plant kind of do it. But if it's got to a point like I mentioned before where the plant is like not breathing, then that's when I will go ahead and step in and help the plant out. But because I've heard, if not, one of the things that I'll be discussing about in because I have a research paper coming up for my English class, is about the use of herbicides and pesticides, and that is something
Mm,
I never condone the use of these hardcore chemicals. I'm like never use those things, because then at that point you're just training the pest and disease to become resistant to
yeah.
it. But when it comes down to organic stuff such as the neem oil,
Yeah.
then that's something I would recommend if your situation has already gotten to a point where it's necessary. If it's not necessary, I wouldn't recommend. Same goes with fertilizers. That's a huge thing that I always talk
Hmm.
about. I always
Yeah.
recommend organic matter, compost or earthworm castings. Those are the things that I recommend the most, as that is almost like liquid gold for
Yeah.
gardening, for growing your own food. Of course, there's your other fertilizers, your industrialized fertilizers that will contain all those good stuff like phosphate, nitrogen, all those things, but they were industrially made. They were
Hmm.
chemically made, and those don't always mean they're the best. So
Yeah.
when it comes to organic matter, yeah, sure, it might have smaller amounts of these nutrients and minerals, but it's more effective because the plant will be more happier at the end of the day. So that's something I always say when it comes down to gardening. If a gardener's like, hey, we want to go ahead and start a garden, what's a fertilizer I should use? I'm like, just stick with earthworm castings. It's great.
Yeah.
Or do your own compost in your own home. So that's something I'd recommend. I know you
Maybe
do.
out. Maybe outside the home, not in the
Yeah,
home. There's a tip.
so we talk about composting. I don't do composting here in my area because of the rodents I deal with, and I don't have that much space where I could dedicate composting to.
Yeah.
But I know you do. So what is
Yeah.
some? What's your little insight on that?
Well, I've had a couple of years to really play with my compost, and now we do have a rodent problem, and I have rats. I have big old fat rats. I trap them in our attic all the time. We There was an upgrade done to this house before we bought it, and there's channels through the insulation up in the walls that allows them to get into our attic. And so I actually spray mint oil in the attic every 2 weeks, and I have 6 traps up there, and I catch rats all the time. But the compost. Now, the interesting thing. Now, what I do, it takes a little space, but what I did back at the apartment, because we were in an apartment for 4 years before we got the house. What I did back at the apartment is I got these 25-gallon grow bags, and I filled them with my compost, mostly leaves, and then I'd put our kitchen scraps in there, and then when one was filled up, I'd put another on top of that, and I had a stack of like 4 of these things, and I would use the bottom one, take it out, put it in my plants, and the thing I discovered was the more browns you get in there, the less likely. There's two things about the rats, especially because I've got rats and raccoons too. But Rats is my worst thing. The more browns you get in there, the more it acts as a desiccant to those kitchen scraps and soaks away those aromas that might attract the rats. So browns is huge, and you're talking 3/4 browns. Dried leaves, even cardboard. If Amazon sends us browns every single day when we get one of their
Yeah,
boxes.
literally.
Shred up the box, stick it in there, and go. And you don't have to shred it in small pieces. I will rip them up into strips about so wide, and just pour it in there, and it's a brown, and it soaks away the smell that attracts the rats. Oh, and the other thing is that um, the people put their kitchen scraps in there and they don't bury them. I bury my kitchen scraps 6 inches, which means I have a little pitchfork that I keep out there, one of those little short pitchforks. Keep it out there. I dig a hole. I dump those kitchen scraps, banana peels, apples, lettuce cuttings, just anything you might get in the kitchen, and I bury it. And I have yet to have a rat dig a hole in one of our compost bins for those scraps. And it's just far enough down in there. But yeah, the browns and the browns is the big one of the big things. I've seen so many people end up with either all browns and it's just this dry hunk that does nothing, or it's not enough browns. It's only half browns and it's slimy and it's wet and it's gloopy, and yeah, the rats are going to enjoy that. But as I'm coming in here, hey, I'm sorry, I'm on the camera, so I can't think of your first name. Wickershire Project. I want to say Jason, but I don't think that's right. That's not right. I hate when I can't remember his name. Names like that. Anyway, so yeah, compost can be tricky, and it takes a while to get the 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 proportions right. And I've got those pallet bins, and one I think I'm teasing here. I think that Big Will Dog is about to put up a pallet compost bin, and I'm really excited to see what he does because it offers enough volume that you can really get some good heat in there, and it processes stuff. And I'm experimenting now with putting um, invasive weed seeds into my compost to see if it's going to be enough to kill them. And I have the Bill. That's right. I'm sorry, Bill. I knew Jason wasn't right. But anyway, so I've got my solar weeds on. I'm trying to get more browns in there. That's just been a big thing for me.
Yeah, when I came to composting, I never really dealt. I did have rat issues because I did have these crates that were sent to me by a company that no longer unfortunately runs. But I do have these crates. But the thing I realized is that once I would put the fruit scraps and the browns in there, the rats would quickly identify it, and they would like dig on the side and
Mhm.
make a huge hole on the side of the crate and enter. So
Oh,
that's
and the
why
holes.
I'm like, I'm not gonna continue with it anymore because it was like a constant thing I was seeing in the garden, rats almost every day, and I don't like that.
Mm,
And so I just kind of just steered away from it. If not, my way of composting is when I trim plants, I just throw them on the ground.
yeah.
Bananas, a great composting thing.
Oh,
I just
yeah.
chop them up. I made a video about it the other day, harvesting
Yeah.
bananas. Chop it up, throw it at the base, great compost as well. I made a video on the best way to feed your bananas, coffee grounds and everything. You just throw it in there. It's the best.
Hmm.
The easiest way I found it as well. So a couple of questions I have for you. So as many of us know, like how I was talking to Gardner Scott the last time we were on an episode on live, we were talking about gardening online because this industry of gardeners online has grown immensely since COVID, because when I had started back in 2019, it was just a group of us, very little gardeners who have broken their face out on the medias. And there was, yeah, sure, a little bit of gardeners joining them, but it wasn't a huge thing like it is today. Now I see gardeners the left and right that I've never seen before, that are new, and that they are making their break on the internet. So, something I want to cover is, when was the time you started your channel? What inspired you per se? What is, your grasp when it comes down to you uploading videos? What is your concept when it comes to uploading your videos, and what is your thought process in general?
Well, I actually had a monetized channel years ago. It's a travel channel called Tigger Travels. It's still there. I still have a lot of content, and I occasionally post when we travel. So I'm familiar with a little bit with YouTube. It wasn't very big. I mean, it was barely monetized, and on today's standards, it would not even get there. But so I had a little bit of background. I'm also a web developer, and I say I'm also a web. I used to be a web developer. I kind of lost that gift. I'm not as good with technology anymore. But as I was getting into it, and right as COVID started, a friend of mine, he was a manager at the uh, Ace Hardware that I worked at. He gave me a tomato plant. He says, "Here, take this home and grow this." I'm like, I tried to grow stuff before. I had never been a successful gardener ever, and um, I took that home and I sat it down and I jumped onto YouTube, um, thinking, okay, I got to figure out what to do with this stupid tomato plant that I can never seem to grow. And I stumbled on uh, Jess Sowards over at Roots and Refuge, and the very first video I watched on YouTube for gardening, the very first video, she was sitting in her old greenhouse propagating out tomatoes, and she talked through every phase of everything you need to know about growing tomatoes. And I learned how to grow that stupid tomato from that video. I was like, okay, I've been teaching. I've been teaching since I was in eighth grade. I taught computers. I've done all kinds of stuff. That's a whole nother story. But anyway, so I started listening to her, and then I started listening to Jess at Plot 37, and you were somewhere. I think within the next year, I started watching you because I remember you planting your ice cream bean plant.
Mhm.
I
Ooh, that
saw
was
that.
that
That was a long
was
time ago.
years ago, actually.
Yeah, I remember you talking about it. That and a few months later was the miracle berry. I'm still looking for a miracle berry, but not very
Ooh.
active.
Yeah, that
But
ice cream bean was 3 years ago.
yeah, so I just really feel like as a Christian, I'm not quiet about me being a Christian. I think God has asked us to be Geppetto. Okay, we'll talk about Geppetto in a second. um, anyway, so I just think it's important for us to live for others and do the best we can to help others. And Jess helped me in that one silly little video for 24 minutes, and then Jess later in another video shortly after that, she said, if you got something to add to this, record a video, put it on. And I took it seriously. And so in the beginning of 21, I was thinking about it. I literally thought over a year about it. What am I going to do? And then in February of 22, I put that first little stupid live stream out. I was trying to figure out what my blueberry plants were. And, with the leaves, I didn't know anything. I'm an idiot out there. And I got to think, it's like, you know what? Sometimes all of us feel like idiots. And if this idiot can figure something out, I can walk other people along. And so I feel like it's something that I can do, and I enjoy doing it and doing just a straightforward. Well, my preacher challenged me about 6 months into it. He said, "Do you show the failures too? You need to show the failures." And so I listened to him and started showing the failures too, and realized, okay, we need to help people walk through this. It's not, and I say this so many times. Your garden doesn't have to look perfect. It just has to be yours.
Exactly.
And you make that garden, just grow something, just try to grow something, and it will blow your mind what will come up just accidentally. Number one, because God made those seeds want to grow, and they will grow for you if you just give them a little bit of love and a little bit of attention, and some of them will grow even if you don't give them attention. But and I just like to share what I'm finding in my garden. And we bought this house 3.5 years ago. We got a quarter acre out there, and it's kind of small space, and I garden in the backyard, I garden in the side yard, I garden on the front yard. I have an okra patch right up there by the sidewalk that I've got 3 neighbors that come and pick okra. And I've showed them how to do it.
Community.
Yeah. And then what was there's a kid that comes by and picks, what does that kid pick? Oh, I had some grapes over here that I had a kid who'd come by, they'd walk in after school in the spring and pick my grapes. Not my grapes, the strawberries. The strawberries used to be where the okra were. And so those kids would come in and they would walk real slow by that strawberry patch. And they knew they could, I gave them permission. They would go over there and carefully pick it off and eat a strawberry going, another 5 doors down to their home. And I don't mind that. It's neat, and they learn stuff about it and get better themselves. And I have more neighbors now that grow stuff. Um, there's a lady named Sherry, and she is a girl from church, and she needed to grow something, and so she started watching, and so now she just gave me her very first little sweet pepper, and she wanted me to have it, and I actually recorded it over breakfast eating that just delicious little sweet pepper. And so yeah, my the whole property, Jay, is about 10,000 square feet. So I figure probably less than half of that is dedicated to the garden, roughly.
Yeah.
I'm on a one man mission to kill all the grass in my yard, though I keep some of it around for the compost pile.
Yeah, when it comes down to, I only use the backyard portion of my house for gardening. Pretty much. The front of yard is more for the pritzies. I do
Yeah.
have, I did make one mango planted there. I actually made a video on it. Juliet mango. That's a
Yeah.
new one I'm trying this year, and it's been doing really, really well. It's only like a year old, and it actually flowered for me this year, but
Ooh,
no
nice.
mangoes. But next year we should have, because if it
Yep.
flowered this year, it's looking pretty good and very healthy so far. So
Yeah.
when it comes down to gardening, I agree with you. You have to make it your own way, because I feel like if we all had the same garden, there would be nothing new to teach, nothing new to really experiment with. And so, like, when it comes down to, just like, for example, like, my one of my big inspirations was David the Good. David the
Hmm.
Good, an amazing gardener. I kind of follow his guide because he has given me lots of tips and advice as well from when we met up, and we hopefully will meet up again soon. Hopefully, back in December, he
I
mentioned.
hear you talking about it. Yeah.
And so hopefully we get to meet again, because from the last time I met him, it was back in 2023. So it's been 2 years now, and so lots of things have changed. Then my channel has grown a little bit more. Um, his channel grew way more. He's coming out. He's a great author as well. And so definitely when it comes down to David the Good, he's a great inspiration. Laura, although she's more of the pritzies, she was my original inspiration. She was more of the gardener who kind of made me go into gardening. I started, as my main knowledge isn't landscaping in general, like um flowers and perennials and
Yeah.
stuff like that. My bigger knowledge is on that, because
Hmm.
that's where I started. But when it comes down to diving into growing your own food, it's really, really fun. I recommend it for almost every gardener. Here in Florida, you'll see lots of the basic flowers. That's what I came to realize. That's why I decided to kind of do the switch over to permaculture, because it's way better, way more performance. You won't get to grow the basics like hibiscus and like birds of paradise. I never really found those really interesting. The only hibiscus I found interesting was um, hardy hibiscus, and that's about pretty much it. And so that's definitely something that has inspired me. Of course, I didn't give up my flowers. I love growing flowers, and I feel like it's necessary to have some pollinators in the garden, because then you wouldn't have a garden
Absolutely.
without them. So definitely, I do have my little knowledge on growing your own food, but of course my vast majority is on actually flowers. If not, I'm like debating if I should, just do general gardening on the channel, because I have made recent videos on like flowers for heat, plants, tips on planting. I've also made lots of grow your own food tips you should do on avoiding gardening mistakes. My channel has evolved to more like a generic channel, to kind of like there's a video for at least everyone in there, not really just like one video for like one singular audience, which mainly it's Florida gardeners, because we kind of like how I heard someone say the other day that we're literally like our own country, because of how we literally do our own things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, and even between your end of the state and my end of the state is extremely different, and it's shocking how different it is.
there's a huge difference when it comes down to it. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about the plants that we grow. So out of all the plants you've grown in your garden, give me your top five, and a little reason why they're your top five.
Well, this year, my top one is turmeric. I am just so
Okay.
thrilled at how tough it's been. And when I put something out in my garden, it's going to need to survive because I may forget it's over there and I may not go to that corner of the yard for 6 weeks. It needs to survive on its own. And so, turmeric, I am so pleased because number one is it's tough. Number two, it has a gorgeous flower, and I am working on flowers, a lot of flowers, and that's I know there's going to be a couple flowers on my list. Top five, huh? That you're making it hard here because I know number two is going to be mint because the mint does a great job of controlling things. Hey, Shawnee, I appreciate you being here. Good to see you. And in fact, you can see in the back screen my computer right there. That's your video paused up there on my top screen. I've been watching Shawnee helping her get her watch hours to her point. But let's see. So yeah, I love my mint. And there's so many horror stories about mint, but you just have to be responsible with it. And you're talking about growing the potato mint. I grow sunchokes. Now sunchokes grow really good for me. Have you tried sunchokes at your place?
Yes.
Do they grow good for you?
Yes.
I would imagine they grow pretty prolific. Um, I'm growing a lot of stuff in containers, and so I know my sunchokes are in the containers too. But I wouldn't put sunchokes on my top. I know my okra. We love our okra. We do Hill Country red okra, and it makes these nice big pods that are still edible. And Mrs. Bowtie chops them up to do fried okra mostly, but sometimes we just chop them up and put them in a salad. And um, but yeah, okra, and that's an acquired taste. Let's see, how many is that? Two? Um, no, brother. It's hard to pick. I do in fact, David the Good is the one that introduced me to the Everglades tomatoes. I'm
Ah,
loving those. They grow prolifically for me. And I don't know if you've seen, I'm growing them up the pomegranate trees. They Last year I had a volunteer grow at the base of a pomegranate tree and it grew right out the top of the canopy. And then it started producing. I thought, holy cow! And so this year I've got like five, I think it is five Everglades tomatoes in big 10-gallon grow bags at the base of five different pomegranate trees, and they're growing up into the canopy, and they're just about to start producing. For us down here, and probably for you too, things like tomatoes don't really produce
mm,
in the summer. You can plant them in the spring, but mine will go kind of dormant over those hot months, and then come September, then they start producing like wildfire because they'll be developing their roots and leaves and everything. I don't know what I'm up to now. Sunchokes, Everglades, tomatoes. Yeah, that's a good list, Shawnee. What she said.
Yeah, I feel like when it comes down to every gardener, depending on how they garden, is depends on their top five. Like me, will
Yeah.
be mainly fruit trees. Like my ice cream bean is one, Barbados cherry is another,
Mm,
sapodilla is a great one here as well. What's turmeric also is a great performer here in Florida. And what's another? Mangoes. I love
yeah.
me some mangoes. And so those
I
are
had a
those. Are,
I had a grapefruit tree, the one that died, and we had 1 year worth of harvest off that silly thing. And I finally cut the stump down literally just a couple of months ago because I didn't want to get rid of the stump in the hopes that that dead thing would start sprouting to life, but it never did.
All right, so the Wikishire Project Off Grid asked, do you find growing in sandy soil difficult with heavy feeding plants? And question number two, do you have to water a lot or is the water table very close to the surface?
Those are two good questions. Um, I'll field that first one. As far as the sandy soil, yeah, when we got here, now we were very fortunate. The owner before us was a gardener, and he
Ooh.
had a 16 by 50 in-ground garden in the backyard that every year he would go get a truckload of chicken manure up the state about an hour, hour and a half away. He would bring back a truckload of chicken manure and spread it over his garden. And so when I dug down in the sand, and trust me, our sand is white. It
Mhm.
snowed on Arby's. In fact, whiter than yours, Emmanuel. But when it had the snow sitting out there, you could barely tell the difference between the snow and the sand. It was so white. But you dig down in his garden, and it was black sand for about 18 inches down. And I actually used that in the garden beds, which is just amazing. So I learned very early is a ton of organic material. We have an equestrian center that is literally 5 minutes away. I take my trailer, I can get 4 yards at a time, and I literally dump a foot of horse bedding compost, and it's well processed. A lot of the stuff I've gotten has been sitting there for 15 years, some of it, but it's very processed, and I just dump organic material, and then our sand. In fact, we lived on the coast in Texas too. That sand, it would pack down. You could drive up and down the beaches. You can't drive on our beaches because the sand never packs. You've been here, right? Almost all the way down to Tampa. It's this white sand that comes out of the mountains in Georgia and Alabama, but it doesn't pack. And so you drive a vehicle out there and you go, you put compost out on the sand. It literally will eat it. I've actually seen someone had put a stone about so big, about the size of my head. They had put a stone as a decorative thing, and it disappeared. And they couldn't understand what happened. And so I went out there, and they had. This was like 2 years after they put it out there. I started digging around in sand. I found that stone over a foot in the sand. No, no one touched it. No one buried it. It literally just sunk in the sand over a 2 or 3 year period. And that's our sand. So whatever you put on there will do great in organic material. It just mixes in, and you have to have that organic material to be able to grow in it. And then, yeah, our water table is very close to the surface. We're at most 3 feet down.
Mm-hmm. Everything David said is on point. My garden was very sandy, if not throughout the years that I've done permaculture. Now it is considered a rich type of soil for Florida, but that's due to the chop and drops, the
Yeah,
feeding, the soil amending. It's not easy. It'll take its time, but it's definitely worth it when it rains and your garden doesn't look like gray ash
yeah.
afterwards. Okay, so there's a question for me. Question, Emmanuel, are you gardening for and educating for YouTube just for fun, or do you have business plan in progress? So the idea is this. So I actually had one of my coworkers at work, because I work at my college actually, and I had one of my coworkers ask me this same question because he came to find out about my pages not that long ago, and I just started working there, so it was interesting. But he asked me the same thing, and the same thing I said was this: I'm studying education as a whole, so that's its own thing. Now, I have hopes and dreams, of course, like any other gardener out there, that my channel would become big one day, and I could self just work on it on its own thing. I don't have to do any.
Woo,
And
dreamy man.
and so when it comes down to the channel, that's what I'm for now. It's more just for the education, and sharing my knowledge with other gardeners for now. But I feel like, yes, my plans is to make a company with products in the future, more towards a plant line down on the future, more than just like products. But all only time will tell, really, because I'm kind of doing two different things. I'm studying general education, but I'm also focusing on the channel. So I'm happy with either or. So it's kind of what time will tell.
I got a comment on that. You don't know this about me. I was the kid that had my own business since I was 7 years old. Back in them days in 19 tickety 2, we used to get those little things out of the comic books, and I could go sell greeting cards from door to door. And my dad, he was a preacher. He helped me get my little spiel out and learn how to say it. And I'd go door to door. And ever since I was in fact, I filed a tax return since I was 11 years old. And so that was like 2 years after the 1040 EZ came out. But when you come out as a young person in high school and you've got a potential there and you're doing good, you're growing, you're finding your way, and that's important. But as you're going along, and I think it's extremely impressive that you're doing that. Look at Luke. You know, over at MI Gardner. Have you ever gone back to his oldest video and see how young he was when he started? He was like a 10th grade or something like that. And look where he's got to now. So it has potential, and you're finding your path. And your story is definitely not done. Neither is mine. And so, yeah, you can definitely. And education, you can't go wrong with education information before you, because that's just something that you're living for others. You're doing things for other people, and it's a noble cause. I appreciate what you're doing. It's one of the reasons why I've liked supporting you since it's been a number of years. I've watched you for a while now. When's the first time I ever commented on your page?
I have no idea.
It's been a while.
Yeah, but it was definitely a learning journey for since I started back in 2019, like something we were talking about with Gardner Scott. He started in 2018, so I started
Mhm.
a year after him, and his channel has grown to be an amazing channel that lots of us gardeners look up to. And he was telling me how he had over 500 plus published videos on his channel, which is
Mhm.
amazing. That's a lot of dedication. And then when I got curious and I looked at how many videos I have over 700. I'm like, what time did I
Me
have to?
too. Yeah.
What time? I'm like, I had too much time on my hands because I'm like on my way to 800. I'm like, where did I have to do time to do that?
Yeah, they
Absolutely no
build up.
time.
Now you do a lot of shorts too, and that's
Yes.
that's probably one of the reasons why you're doing so much better on subscribers than I
Yeah, when it comes down
am.
to so here's the whole thing, right? So there's this gardener who came out recently. I would probably say he only has not even a year in the industry. Well, let me fact check that as a matter of fact. Let me fact check it before I say anything. Because I say he's new because I just recently saw him and his pages seem to be new. However, he has been doing amazing. When I mean amazing, I mean like his videos are performing crazy well. And he actually was planning to come out to my garden on Saturday. I actually made a post saying that I had someone coming over that same Saturday, but due to a random storm that randomly decided to form itself, he couldn't come over because it was too dangerous for him to come down. But he is planning to come down once again, but he's a really good gardener. He has learned a lot. See, he only has, I'm looking back at his videos and he started in April of this year. And his channel has been doing really, really well. And I use his videos as an inspiration because of how he formatted them. And his videos are like booming with views and everything. And so I definitely like when it comes down to filming, I feel like the way you edit plays a huge part in how the viewers tend to see. Because when I decided to do the shift in editing, I don't know if you realized that with the shorts, I did a huge shift. Now I added captions, they're way more shorter to the point.
Yeah,
Then those started actually performing better
yeah,
than the ones I did previously, that I would take my time in detailed showcasing what each plant was. And I feel like, of course, the detailed, more informative videos are useful, but people just want to see one and done videos, one and done.
yeah.
So
Looking at the shorts, yeah, that's. And I've actually Jay Dixon mentioned Geppetto. Geppetto is a friend of mine. Geppetto. Geppetto, GPT. So Chat GPT is who Geppetto is. And it's my code name for AI. And I've been using AI, and in fact, Tony O'Neill kind of has been mentoring me a little bit with how to use AI and stuff. And because I didn't get a lot of it, and I noticed that actually Scott has noticed. Scott and I talk occasionally, but Scott has noticed that things have been changing over the past year, this year so far, and a lot of it is because of that. Getting my shorts more to the point and trying to eliminate the and the because I used to
right,
some of my old videos. Oh my gosh, I look at it now. It's like
uh, uh,
my brother is he's in the what's the big organization that does speeches and stuff. It's a club. Um, what Jay Dixon? No, Jay may not know. She's in Canada. Anyway, um, it's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, they practice making speeches, is what they do in their meetings, and there's always someone there counting the uhs and the ums and the
yeah, because that's a
and
huge one.
and, and so I've been trying to work on that, and then I also do a lot more in editing now. I can actually edit out um and I know some you can always tell who says a lot because their videos jump every few seconds.
Right.
But yeah, I'm working a lot on that myself and trying to get things a little smoother,
It seems
and
like in
I've
all
done better.
the videos, you see a lot of cuts because it's usually I just blink. Like I would just be talking because I
Yeah.
don't follow a script. I don't write what I'm gonna say beforehand. I just kind of do it. And sometimes when I'm trying to put together what I'm trying to say, like I would say it and then like pause and forget what I was gonna say. And so I'd have to redo the scene. Or I had multiple times because now I actually use these mics.
Toastmaster. Thank you. Shawnee
Um,
got it. Toastmaster. Go
oh, there
ahead.
you go.
Yeah, the mics. Yeah, I saw you holding that
I
mic.
use these mics because since I live in the city, there's a lot of noise,
Yeah.
lawnmowers going off, beeping, horning, a whole bunch of things. So these are very useful. However, I've done the mistake of not charging them properly. And so I would go through an entire video that would take me like an hour to film. And then once I would sit down, get ready to edit the video, I would see that the entire audio was blanked out, muted, and I'd have to go out and refilm everything again. So that's the only downfall about these things, but they're very useful. And so, believe it or not, I think I actually believe that the video I did on, let me see, because it was actually recent I did this on a beginner's guide to seed starting. That one I actually filmed. Come to realize that only the intro was actually with
Yep.
audio, and then I had to go outside and refilm the entire thing again because of it. So it's,
Well,
but it's you
we
learn.
we we live in the middle of 4 Air Force bases, 2 airports, a heliport, and 2 bombing ranges across the bay that we can hear very clearly. So yeah, we have a lot of noises. I've done some bloopers on that. And then sometimes you're sitting there right in the middle of a sentence, and a squadron of fighter jets fly over, and you're just kind of waiting for the noise because you can't even hear yourself talk. And then we wait for the noise, and then you have to sit there for a minute thinking, what was I just talking about? Or that big truck goes by.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Like something I came to realize is when I started my channel, I had someone comment saying that thank you for not saying or I was like, what is this person talking about? And then when I came down to saw a video of like a channel who had started years ago, they no longer are running, they would say and a lot.
Yeah,
And I was like, because then I realized that that could be distracting and that is like not good for a video or someone who's wanting to present
hmm
information. So I've never seen myself saying or
you've
I've
always done good with that.
but I've seen a lot of gardeners say, "Hey, I struggle with that," and that's why they have lots of cuts because they don't
Yeah,
want the to showcase. Because also, what I realize is when you say or it's probably a sign of you don't know what you're what
yeah.
you're saying. So that's why I'm like, so
Another thing that I've do, and I've programmed my Geppetto. The reason why I call him Geppetto is because I have programmed him. He has a different personality for mine, and like he knows that when he does write scripts for me. I don't always follow them. In fact, I almost never do. But he knows I never say things like to tell you the truth, or I will not lie, or that, because as soon as you say to tell you the truth, well, were you
yeah,
not telling me the truth 30 seconds
right,
ago?
right.
And puts that doubt in there. And you do good with that, things like that too. And there's a lot of just superfluous things we put into our talk that just annoy the snot out of me.
Alrighty, so we're gonna go ahead and accept one or two more questions. So if you have any questions, please put them in the live chat for me or David to answer, and we'll gladly answer them. As we were talking about a little bit of everything we've talked about, but mainly about tips and tools. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them down, and we will go ahead and answer them.
The joy of David living near a military airfield. Isn't that the truth? Oh my gosh. I have seen days that we have a squadron of osprey fly up the beach, which is 7 blocks from us. When 8 osprey fly up the beach, they're loud. That's those vertical takeoff and land airplanes. And then right behind them, I've seen a couple of bombers fly up the beach, and then a banner plane or 2 or 3 flies over. We have banner planes flying over for the beach all the time, and then we have 6 jets take off from our airport, which is literally a mile and a half over here, and their takeoff pattern is right over us. It's a mess.
All right, has a question for you. What was your most surprising aspect slash experience in gardening?
That's a very good question, and Jay knows me very well, so she's trying to stump me here. I'm sure of it. But you know, I've been gardening since I was a kid. I did the little fourth grade project growing beans, and I
Uh-huh.
tried to grow cucumbers in eighth or sixth or eighth grade, and then years later, I tried to grow tomatoes back in our place in Arkansas. I've talked about that. I've just never really seen much success, but once you just figure out a very basic number of things, it's amazing what just wants to grow. And once you figure out how to speak their language, oh my gosh, things just take off and you can't stop them. But they're just going to go and go and go. Loofah was my big can't stop last year. I planted 5 loofah plants. I don't know if you saw any of my loofah drama last year. It My loofah ate half of my yard and my backyard neighbor's yard. There's a video of both of our properties covered in loofah. But things want to grow, and there's so much information that you can get for free here on YouTube from people like Emmanuel and Shawnee and um, Bill over at the Wickershire Project, and so many people. You can get good information. David the Good. I mean, we've listened, and I whenever I do videos, I always put links to the places I'm talking about, and I make
Right.
sure I talk about a lot of people because it's not just about my information. It's about getting the information to you no matter where it comes from, and it might be the exact same information, and you might hear it from me, but the next guy over, he's a different person, and he might hear it better from Emmanuel or David the Good. All these people have these different ways of speaking, and I think it's so important that everybody can figure things out. uh, but it's things will grow.
So, Shawnee actually asked, "What series do you would like to have in your channel, but aren't so sure about it?"
How about you? I want to hear your next series.
So, of course, I have the series with David the Good that I did, and I would love to redo that one. There
Hmm.
was one that came to my mind, however, that one I decided to hold off because of the project I'm doing right now, currently, that I'm working behind the scenes. And so that's why I decided to not move forward with the series because it's going to be used somewhere else, which you'll see once time gets closer.
Ah, teasing something, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
okay. Um, I I've been talking to a friend of mine, and he and I are looking at more about God in the garden and trying to figure out how we can work that out because I think it's very important that we recognize where it all comes from. And that's one thing I would like to get more into. Um, but there are so many different plants that I want to do. Right now, I got like 4 videos in my brain that I need to record. I've been propagating this summer, and I really need to do a whole series on propagation. But rosemary, citronella, strawberries, so many things out there that we can propagate for free. And your little air layering video with duct taping the bag around the branch and all things like that. I think that's so important because it can it okay it can be very expensive to get into gardening,
Mm-hmm.
but does it have to be?
Right.
No, it really doesn't. And the thing is, in fact, I was just watching Shawnee's live stream on the aquatics systems. In fact, she and I have been holding conversation in the chat in there. But um, all these aquaponics stuff that they sell, they're kits, and then they want you to buy the special pod that fits in their kits. So they've got you on a legal form of addiction. You always have to buy your pods from them, and so it's just a continuing thing, and it doesn't have to get that expensive, and you can figure those things out. Don't be fooled into thinking that that's the only way to do it. And anybody, okay, I'm going to say this, and I know I haven't seen anybody in here that I've ever heard say this, but we both know who says this. This is the only way to do it. This is the only way you'll succeed. And we both know that is so not true. And there's different ways for every personality, and so yeah,
There's actually a comment that made it to the YouTube live section, but not this section we have here that me and David are referring to, which is from the Wickershire Project, which asked me if I have any plans for selling seeds and propagations in the future. So yes, there is a project that I am working on that is starting plants and propagating plants for me to start an online shop. However, I have done a couple online shops in the past. They haven't been successful, so that's why I just decided to close those down and just focus on building the channel up right now. Because when it comes down to having these shops, yeah, sure, you can have lots of support with your OG audience members, which is really, really great. But to see like a real outcome, it's recommended like how I spoke with David the Good. David the Good is a well-known author who has lots of books out there. He's able to do these things and publish these things because of his following. He knows he'll have a good group of people that will buy his books if a new one comes out. And so that's kind of something that I'm trying to work myself towards. I'm currently working on building the channel right now, and then see if time permits to create a small little thing, whether it be seeds, cuttings, or trees. I don't know what it will be exactly, but it is in the projects. It's just I'm waiting for the channel to reach a certain point for me to go ahead and release it. Because I know like David and other people have said they would support it. And of course, I could work with them one on one individually and say, hey, if you want this plant, I can ship it out to you. But like to create a whole site, it's like a lot of
yeah.
project and a lot of money when it comes down to that as well. Because sites are not cheap, unfortunately.
Unless you got your own server, and I still have my own server. So Shawnee mentioned about the loofah squares. That was Bree Ellis. It's Bree Ellis is her YouTube channel, and she took loofah, grew loofah, and sewed them into nesting box pads for her chickens. In fact, she just
Oh,
reviewed those again here on her last video. I follow her. She's in Ohio. That's fascinating what you can do. There's tons of
right.
stuff you can do. I'm actually okay. I'll tease a new project. Um, I still have a whole bunch of loofah sitting. I harvested 500 loofah last
Oh, no.
year, and my neighbor harvested another 100. So we had a lot of. I still have a tub out there, and I'm going to do seed starting. I'm going to cut the middles out of the loofah. I'm going to fill it with soil like a little seed pod, and I'm
That's
going to fill it with soil, and I'm going to try planting seed starts in
Luther
the
starts.
loofah and just
Oh,
drop it in the ground when it's ready. You talk about
dude.
not messing with the roots.
Gotta keep us posted.
There you
Alrighty.
go.
So there you go. Jay posted a link towards Realis. So
Yeah.
we're gonna go ahead and wrap up today's live stream. Once again, a huge shout out to David from Bowtie Garden Life. Huge shout out to him for joining with us on this live stream. Jay, an amazing moderator. Thank you for putting all the links of what we've mentioned throughout this entire live stream. Thank you once again for all your hard work. And if you want to reference to go follow David, they should be in the live stream as well as in the description box below, as they'll be linked. So thank you everyone who has joined us on this live stream. Thank you once again, David, for joining with us as well.
It's my
And
honor.
we'll see you guys next time with our next guest, which will be like a reminder through all the community posts on the channel. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Emmanuel.